السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome back to yet another exciting episode of The Lanterns of Light. And on this week's episode, we have a very exciting guest with us, Sh Joe Bradford. Thank you, Sheikh, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And so, as usual, we start with a little bit of educational background. I'm sure most people have heard, at least in the United States, but also overseas, have heard of Sheikh Joe. But we just want to talk a little bit about what your background is. So you're an entrepreneur, you're an American scholar of Islam. You've gotten two master's degrees, one in Islamic law from the University of Medina, and another a master's in Islamic capital markets. See, the second master's, it's such a specific master's, and I think I would love to delve into that more because what are Islamic capital markets and what makes them different from normal regular capital markets,
right?
And then you studied traditionally in the Muslim world for about 20 plus years, and you're currently pursuing a PhD at the International Islamic University of Malaysia with a focus on financial injustice. And your experiences, you're a certified Sharia advisor and auditor certified by the AAOIFI, accounting and auditing organization for Islamic financial institutions. Learned what that is.
It's always a mouthful. It's always a mouthful. Everyone just says IOFI. So yeah, it's always
IOFI. Okay, you know what?
That's a mouthful in English and in Arabic. So yeah.
Yeah. IOFI. But you've also served as the vice president and senior Sharia consultant for Ar-Rajhi Bank, which is the largest Islamic bank in the Middle East. And right now, you're doing a lot of things, but one of the things you're doing is you're an ethical finance advisor with expertise in Islamic law, business, and finance, specifically in the North American market. And you offer services such as estate and insurance planning, investment and startup advisory, real estate development advisor. You're also an author, and I'm running out of breath here. MashaAllah, may Allah bless you and increase you. You're the author of Simple Zakat Guide, 40 Hadith on Wealth and Earning, and you've also translated Qadumi's Elementary Hanbali Primer and other books as well. Yeah. And you're the founder of Muslim Money Guide. So all that to say, we have a very qualified guest with us today, and hopefully that expertise will be reflected when we start this discussion, inshallah. Thank you.
Absolutely. A pleasure.
So let's just start from the very beginning. We like to ask our guests, about their background. Like, what got you into this? I mean, from 2 master's degrees to 20 plus years of studying traditionally, you kind of got the best of both worlds. What began this journey into this rich, tapestry of knowledge that you've gathered?
Yeah. So, well, when I initially accepted Islam, I was very fortunate that there were many community members who recognized that I had a love for learning. I think the love for learning and reading was instilled in me by my mother from a very early age. And when I came to the Muslim community and people noticed that, they said, hey, you can actually go and study this stuff in a formal sense. Like, you should do that. You seem to want to study. And I was very keen on learning the Arabic language early on, learning the different, sciences of Islam, etc. And so, there was a community member, may Allah have mercy on him, Curtis Shabazz, who I think, while many people were encouraging, he was the one who actually kind of sat me down and said, look, like you need to go overseas and study Islam and bring it back to people. And this is my advice to you. And I wrote up my kind of memories of sitting with him in his car on a blog post a couple years back. But I would say his advice was some of the very first advice that was very influential in saying, hey, take this serious. And he passed away, years later from cancer. One of the first janazas that I ever prayed. But yeah, I'd say his advice and the advice of other community members was instrumental. A few years after that, I really didn't know anything about something called Islamic finance, and I knew of fiqh and things like that, Islamic law, but I wasn't, I didn't know that there was a specialization. And then we had an event in a local masjid, and so that story is actually in Florida. This is now I'm living in Texas, and we had an event in a local masjid, and just to give people kind of context, we didn't have StreamYard and Riverside and, YouTube Live and all that kind of stuff back then. If you wanted to do anything, like the height of technological progress at that time was, 15 different masjids would each put $100 in and get an international conference calling number for 2 hours. And so, $1,500, you'd have 15 masjids call in from all over the country. Prior to that, everyone would put a list of questions together and fax it to the scholar overseas to answer. And so we sat on the phone, with the people. Some people segmented who could understand Arabic and those who could not, and somebody live translating all of these questions and answers. And I just remember this scholar, mashallah, may Allah have mercy on him. He was a premier person in the field, but he was quite austere and he was quite stringent in everything. And so all of the answers just came out to be no, 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 haram, probably not, haram, And so I just remember the frustration of one of the brothers there at the masjid. And he was so frustrated. And he said, what is this? Like, is everything haram? Like, I'm a cable installer and I've got 6 kids at home, and the government can come and take my kids from me because I live in a 2-bedroom apartment and I'm not supposed to do that, but I can't buy a house. So what am I supposed to do? And it was his frustration that really kind of put it into my mind that, yeah, maybe this is an area that I can take a look at, right? And I can, is it reasonable to say that Islam is based on mercy? The first verse of the Quran is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and everything is a no, and everything is you're just considered to struggle. Where do the roles of need and necessity and permissible or impermissible, all of this come into that? And that brother's frustration was really the reason why I specialized in Islamic finance. I started to read, find people, get in contact with experts. And then, when I was finally, alhamdulillah, blessed to go overseas and study, I made it a point to do the same and to find out about, who was an expert in their field, how could they be benefit, what path would they set me on? I think a lot of people have the misnomer that, if you work in Islamic finance, you just kind of do a degree or a program and that's it. And they don't really understand that there's a lot of scaffolding that goes underneath that. Like, there's a lot of structure of learning fiqh and usul and the ahadith al-ahkam and all of that. So, so I was lucky in the beginning to find a few people who were also specialists who were saying, hey, these are the books that you need to read. These are the people that you need to go to. These are the topics that you need to concentrate on if you want to make a difference in this field. So alhamdulillah, I'm very, very fortunate to have met them.
And I would say that that frustration that you encountered with that brother, I'd love to get your thoughts. Do you think that frustration to some extent is still, I mean, I know we've made progress in this field, but do you think that frustration is still there amongst Muslims living in the West? Like, it just seems like everything, I mean, maybe the frustration shifted where now not everything is haram, but everything is almost like it's allowed, but it's like it's allowed because of arukhsa, because of it's an ease in the religion, rather than it's something that we can freely with all of our heart believe that what, this is the right thing we're doing, and we have an alternative solution that's real.
Yeah, so I think there has been progress. I think that one of there's a twofold problem. One is a problem with the general Islamic literacy of the community. And people don't like to hear this because they want people that are quote unquote religious to come and tell them that they're good, they're going to Jannah and everything's fine and the problem's somewhere else. Right? But that's not the case. A lot of people are operating on a very, very rudimentary understanding of Islam that reflects their Sunday school education. And they do not put the same effort into improving their Islamic literacy that they do in other forms of literacy, whether it be in their specialization at work, whether it be in literature or sports or anything else. And when they do exert some effort, sometimes that effort is in, well, I have a preconceived notion about this being wrong. Let me prove it the opposite. Let me show how there is no difference. And so what you end up with is a lot of kind of seeking more rukhsa instead of actually understanding like the form and the function of the financial world that you're dealing with. Because there will be absolutely some things that are absolutely unequivocally haram, right? We should not mince words about that. There will be things that are absolutely unequivocally halal. And as the Prophet ﷺ himself said in the hadith of Nu'man ibn Bashir, وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبَهَاتٌ لَا يَعْلَمُهُنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ. Between the two are ambiguous matters that not many people will know. It means that some people will know. And that's where kind of the industry comes in, right? So the public has a responsibility to educate themselves more about the parameters of halal and haram. And then where we fall into problems in the middle is that we have a dearth, we have a a lack of specialists in the field, right? That have the industry knowledge and the Islamic knowledge. And we also have an active industry marketing products to them that does not itself undergo continuous review and R&D. And so you'll have somebody saying, okay, well, your mortgage product, is it halal? I'm skeptical. My friend said it's the same thing as a commercial loan. And they'll say, no, brother. Scholars have approved this. Well, when did they approve it? 1982. Right? Okay, but the industry has changed between them. And in any industry where you have a change in the legal framework and in the contracts and the drafting and all of that, and the regulations, most importantly, you should also have an ongoing review of the Sharia issues, right? And this is where the issue of not just advising a company, but auditing a company comes up. So we have advisors that'll go and they'll issue this is permissible. But what happens after that point? Are they implementing it properly? Are they marketing it properly? Because a lot of organizations that do kind of Islamic financial services, their product might be fine. They just don't know. They don't know how to market it to people in a way that is not fringy and salesy, and doesn't turn around and make the people unconvinced of what they're doing. Unfortunately, I have an acquaintance who once said, I was told by one guy, hey, you either use our product or you go to hell. You have to make that choice. Which is a horrible way to talk to people, right? So, the problem as well as with the industry is kind of the unwillingness to undergo constant review and audit. I think that's a big issue as well, right? Another issue with that as well is the insistence in the sphere of religious leadership, of scholarly leadership in this area. Many times scholars themselves are reticent to issue an opinion unless they're doing it in a collective framework, underneath a council of sorts. And that in and of itself stifles innovation and actually makes things much slower. So Muslims are like, why don't we have answers to these cutting edge issues? Because what you're looking at as cutting edge, somebody's taking 5, 6, 10 years to answer. By that time, the market's changed. And so the community feels that they're constantly lagging behind. And fatwa was not an issue of collective, communal, congregational fatwa. It was very few and far between in the early Islamic period. But it's become kind of in vogue. But I think that it itself also contributes to the misconceptions that are around. I'll stop.
No. Please keep talking. This is good information, and I guess this is a perfect time to just kind of jump straight into those questions, right? Because one of the things that I hear often is, as you said, there's a general lack of knowledge amongst Muslims. I mean, in principles of their deen, but also specifically in this topic. And so one of the questions that often Muslims raise is, there's this thing called Islamic finance. But what makes finance Islamic, other than the fact that it's different than conventional finance because of the prohibition of riba? But is there more to it? Is it as simple as this?
So you bring up a really great issue, and this is one of the things that I was actually talking to a young lady yesterday who's kind of going into this field as well, like in a mentorship session. And I make it the point, and I told her that, to make this point as well, is in the United States, I think it's actually a disservice to continue to use the term Islamic finance. Not because we're special in the United States. I don't believe in American exceptionalism. I think that's like a whole other ideological, issue that we have, as thinking just because we're in the U.S. we're somehow better or more understanding or whatever, right? But we do have scenarios which are very specific to the United States, right? And in that we need scholarship and leadership that addresses those. So, but to use Islamic finance, right? So if I'm in Saudi Arabia, if I'm in Egypt, if I'm in Jordan, if I'm in Qatar, if I'm in Malaysia, if I'm in Indonesia, if I'm in Singapore, right? And I use the term Islamic finance, and that's not all inclusive. That's just naming countries off the top of my head. If I use the term Islamic finance, people understand that I'm talking about a very specific segment of the economy, a very specific domain of expertise that's connected to institutions, products, and regulations. Now, that understanding is taken and ported onto the American landscape. It doesn't match up because Muslims are going, oh, well, I can't do Islamic finance. We don't have Islamic banks. I guess I just won't do anything. So we get two extremes. We get one extreme that says, well, it doesn't matter. You're in America, right? Special situation. Just do whatever you want. Or you're in America, special situation. Don't do anything, right? You're not. So everything becomes in this binary of black and white. And we know from the Sharia that there are grays. There's a gradient. We wouldn't have everything from, wajib / halal to mustahab, mubah, makruh, and haram if there wasn't a gradient in between. And so using the term Islamic finance, I generally will tell people, well, I say let's look at Muslims and money. Let's look at an Islamic financial mindset, a Muslim money mindset, and not use the term Islamic finance because it's very industry specific. And what we do is we inculcate the idea that, well, in order for us to do anything financial here in the U.S., we would have to create a counterculture or use alternative services. I mean, there's a number of times people will call me and they'll say, I want to start a retirement account. My job offers me retirement, but do I have to go to like Amana Mutual Funds and open an account with them? And they're like, no, Amana Mutual Fund, you don't open an account with Amana Mutual Funds. Amana Mutual Funds are funds that you invest in. You're like, okay, I'm confused. Like, I thought I had to go to the Islamic organizations to do that. It's like, no, you can use Fidelity and then buy the funds. Oh, okay, so is that allowed? Because there's been this conditioning of everything is impermissible, right? Or everything is permissible. So that kind of makes people swing between the two extremes, and I don't think it's healthy. There's obviously going to be companies and products and services that would be permissible to use, no problem, and then others that that would be between that.
Sorry, my mute button got stuck.
No.
So just to kind of follow up on that, I guess going back to even talking about riba, right? Now these are for you mentioned some people make everything impermissible, and then you have the other extent where people make everything permissible. But then you see these opinions every now and then, and they're far and few in between about riba and how modern interest doesn't equate to riba.
Sure.
And I know this is maybe a more specialized topic, but these are something that Muslims do talk about. They say like well, technically today's riba is not actually today's interest is not riba, considered riba. So what would your response be to those people? Is that a correct way of thinking?
Well, I mean, yeah, this is a very broad topic, right? So to do it justice would really need kind of like a preparation and a separate whole podcast episode. But
you have you have 1 minute to explain everything.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I would say that the ideas and the rules of riba in the Quran and the Sunnah in the tradition of Islamic scholarship are very clear. Where people, or where, I shouldn't say just people, but where issues arise is in approximating those rules to the situations at hand, or to again, goes back to that very rudimentary understanding of what that means to be applied to any given situation. So some people will say, "Oh, well, you've made you made money on this investment. Oh, you put in money and you got out more. Well, any money on top of money is haram. That's riba. You can't do that." Not understanding that the contract that governs that and the activities of that investment is what determines whether it would be, oh, did they take your money and guarantee the same money back with more? That's riba. Cash on cash now for more cash later, it's definitely riba. But no, cash now that I'm going to go and buy products and sell and resell and flip, and after a year split up the profits between me and you, although you didn't have any kind of transparency into the day-to-day management, is not. And that might seem like an extremely simplistic example to people, but it is a real world example, because I face that many times. People don't understand the basic function of how business works. And so they will they have that misnomer about, well, if it's permissible for me to get more by investing in a company and get dividends, then why isn't it permissible for me to just put money in the bank and get more back? This one's more and this one's more. The cash flows look almost exactly the same. But if we're only looking in a quantifiable sense of numbers and cash flow, then literally every financial transaction is the same. But what controls a financial transaction are the contracts that are underneath. And you might say, well, how do I know the contract is good or not? The key is what happens on the contingencies. So tawari al-aqd, anything that creeps up on a contract and changes it to an issue of distress or default, of renegotiation, that shows us what's really happening with our money when we put it into an investment. So you'll have some opinions that will be based on a misunderstanding of just how business works. I think a lot of that has to do with, we have a lot of people in our community who are just W-2 salary workers. Like, they literally just go to work, they receive a salary, they don't even know, like, how that functions. It's like, oh, I've been working for 10 years. I didn't even know what FICA was. Our FICA, I didn't know why was this percentage of money being taken out of my check? I don't know. They've always been doing it. Now I want to know. They were putting money into something called the 401k. What is that? You've been working for 10 years and they've been doing it. Oblivious, right? And that's sometimes just because life gets in the way. I think another thing too is that you have in certain countries parallel financial systems that they will have both conventional and Islamic banks. And so you'll look at a country like Egypt, a country like Pakistan, a country like Saudi Arabia, most of the Gulf, where they will have both conventional banks and Islamic banks. And people will hear fatwa from those countries, and you'll have, like, say, a mufti from Egypt who will say, فوائد البنوك ليست riba. The interest paid by banks is not riba. And he may very well be speaking about a very specific type of, say, savings instrument in an Islamic bank, and not talking about the banking industry in general. But people will say, oh, well, the sheikh, he said that, it's not riba, so it's not riba. And then some of them they'll say, well, yeah, in my madhab, we consider riba only applicable to tangible metals and weighed goods, and paper notes and electronic blips on a screen are not weighed, they're not tangible. Therefore, riba doesn't apply to them because the illah, the legal, rationale is not the same. But that goes back to like, okay, what is the operative principle, in a scholarly sense, of applying the rules of riba to the modern world? And did the scholars of that school actually maintain that position, or did they also change over time because they saw that the mode of currency and therefore transfer of value changed over time? So you had hard currencies, gold and silver, then it went into representative currencies, and that was like copper and bronze, what we would call, it's called fulus in Arabic, and those are representative of the gold and silver that they were supposedly backed by. And then from representative currencies, you went into fiat currencies, which is most modern cash now, right? Now we have cryptocurrencies. That's another challenge for that, right? So with all of these different forms, right? If the illah was only the idea of them being weighed or not, right? Then that's been gone for a very long time. But we still see the same financial problems. We still see the fact that I lent Muhsin $500 and I demanded back $550, right? And he's saying, well, I don't have $550 to give you. I just have your $500. Okay, well, where's that extra value coming from? Well, I'm demanding it because the value of the underlying currency itself has changed. And we have to look at the absolute value that's being transferred and not the numerical value of the note. Okay, but by me demanding something from you, which I didn't put any kind of input in or share in the risk of, I'm taking from you the legal rationale of the value being there is established. But the hikmah as well, the wisdom behind this, is that why are we preventing people from charging more value than what they've given in a loan? Because essentially the wisdom is we want to prevent people from taking advantage of others, or from taking, even somebody says, well, there's no advantage. Both Muhsin and Joe are millionaires, right? Inshallah. But both of them are millionaires. Why would it be wrong? Because I'm taking something that was not my right to take. If I just walked into your home and took an expensive vase or something off of the table, I'd be like, what are you doing? Dude, you owe me this. Why would I owe you? You ate dinner at my house the other night. I'm simply extracting the value of what I put into this relationship. So there's the legal rationale, the illah, there's the wisdom behind it, the hikmah, and in navigating those two, I think that's where the issue of like misaligning issues of riba or thinking of riba only in a very medieval sense happens.
And I think this kind of answers this. Some people bring this argument forward that Islamic banking is just replacing interest with fees. But I think you answered that with, you having, it's going back to the actual contracts themselves. It's not about what it might seem or what titles that these different things have, but it's rather the contract itself. What does the contract entail? And I think that answers that. And, as for your example, that at the end, in terms of, giving 500, but expecting like 550 back, the traditional riba that we think of. Is there this idea in Islam, and I've heard this argument before, that in Islam loans are more of a charity form rather than an actual financial instrument, versus if you wanted to go into business, or if someone's asking for a big loan, traditional loan, you would go into like partnership or something like that. Is that thinking true, that in Islam, when someone asks you for a loan, that's not really a financial transaction, more than it is a financial transaction, but not in the traditional sense of you're trying to make money off or something like that, but more in a spiritual sense that this is charity?
So there are three types of contracts under Islamic law. In Arabic, they call them uqud al-muawadat, wat-tabarru'at, wat-tawthiqat. So you have commutative contracts. They exchange value between two parties. So I give you money, you give me a product. So now there's been an exchange of value, from one to another. There's التوثيقات, these are recording contracts. I've left $500 with you as a deposit, right? You've given me a receipt that anytime I come back or somebody holding that receipt will come back and pick up that $500. I've left a piece of collateral with you. I've left an expensive watch that you're going to keep in safekeeping for me, right? Or you've loaned me $500 and you took collateral. You said, I'll give you the cash, but you got to leave something of value so I can guarantee that you'll come back and pay me. So that's called apt tawthiq, right? So it's like having a lien, having a record of deposit that in and of itself, it simply records the financial value and the right for it to be retrieved. And then the third is a donative contract, apt tabarru, and that is a one-way transfer of value, right? So one way, I guess you could say, physical transfer of value from one party to another. So I'm giving you, $500 either temporarily, and you'll give me that value back, or I'm giving you $500, and that's charity to you. That's sadaqah. So if I'm giving you $500 and I'm expecting it back, what do I get out of that as a donor, as a loaner, as someone who is a lender, as a creditor? What I get out of that is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, when أقرض مالا كان له أجر نصف صدقته أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Whoever loans some money will get the reward of having given half of it in sadaqah. So if I loan you $500, I'm getting the reward of $250 in sadaqah. If I loan that to you twice, I'm going to get the full reward of $500, right? And there are a few different ahadith on this topic. The idea here is that I'm cutting off the ability to create a debt through a loan and then trap the debtor into extracting value from him over time because of his inability to pay. So I'm saying, look, we're not going to allow the door to deferred transfers of wealth to become a source of revenue for the rich, because then all I'm doing is essentially is the only risk that I'm bearing is to my capital, but I'm also keeping you in an endless situation of paying value back to me, and I am preventing you from actually taking risks. So I'm burdening you with a debt, I'm burdening you with money on top of that debt, and I'm preventing you from taking the risks that if you were in business, you might be able to, you might have the confidence to actually go out and make more money than even the money that I've given you, and because you know that you're going to benefit. So I'm misappropriating or essentially sapping from you your economic viability by demanding that debt to be paid back. So I'm not sharing in the economic activity. The economic activity is the risks are borne by you, the expenses are borne by you, and the only risk that I bear is that you may never come back and pay me back that money. But I'm saying, no, I want that money, and I want on top of that money. So essentially, I'm saying I need you to subsidize my expenses through your economic activity. So this is the height of a handout, right? So in the interest-based economy operates on a level above the real economy. It doesn't involve itself in real economic activity, and so it's essentially a welfare program. It's welfare for the rich. It's saying poor people, because they don't have money, we have the right to then extract value from them over time, that unless they can prove themselves and make more money than possible to be able to pay back our capital, pay back the interest, and then have what they can survive on, they're not deserving. And so in that is a kind of nascent sense of lording over others and putting oneself in the position of Allah. Because with interest, if you were to, take charging interest, charging an amount of money on an unutilized or unpaid value over time, you would essentially, end up with an amount of money that's greater than all money in existence. So it goes against the laws of nature in and of itself.
And I think that, sometimes we don't really understand, almost like the Islamic understanding of why certain things have been made prohibited. Why is interest just intrinsically morally wrong, right?
Right.
And I think this gives a very good analysis of why that is.
Well,
And
I want to just add something there, because I usually see this come up. People will say, well, that's fine and good between people, right? But we're talking about at the level of companies and between the wealthy themselves and between countries. And my answer to that always is, okay, let's look in a macro sense. Every time we have here in the United States right now, the interest rate is about 7 to 8%. Okay. When we have a 7 to 8% interest rate, developing countries around the world have a 30 to 35% interest rate. So they're probably at 36 to 40% right now. Egypt, I believe, just reached 30%. Which means you can put money into a bank in Egypt and receive 30% interest. But by the time the 1-year tenor of that loan to the bank is up, because the country had to pay its loans to the IMF and to international banking, and because of the status of trade and the waste and the corruption in the country, the value of the underlying currency is now not even worth the original amount that you put in the bank. And this is all because of why? It's not only because of what's happening in the country, it's because of the international system of loans and clearing those loans that essentially continues to extract that value from developing countries in exchange for aid, exchange for business, exchange for a lot of different things. So when I go and I take a loan from the local bank and I say, oh, well, I'm not hurting anyone. Okay, but I'm contributing to an industry. I'm contributing to an industry that in and of itself is tied into a global system of exploitation. So it's not just, oh, it's a victimless crime. It's harmless. It's feeding into a larger system that's doing the same to entire countries on an exploitative scale, which is why the relatively comfortable, not even the wealthy, of an affluent country can gain access to loans because the returns are coming from other places.
so the same thing that's happening on an individual level is happening on a global scale, on the levels of countries.
Absolutely.
Wow. Thank you for that. That was something that, I personally, I didn't know. We know that there's a global economy and it all connects somehow, but that was a really good explanation to help us understand how we could be contributing at a singular level to a more complex problem on a global level. And, just to kind of take a step back from all of this, right? I want to give you a case scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
I come here, I move here to America. I'm, let's say, in med school, law school. I don't really have that much money. I have a family with me, so I need to buy a house. I need to buy a car. I'm going to professional school, so I don't have the money to pay for it, but I need it to make a better life for myself. What would be your advice to them? Like, should I go to a regular traditional bank? Should I take that ease offered by the religion, or should I go to Islamic banking? What would be your advice to those type people?
So it's very difficult, and I generally hesitate to give general advice like this because I believe that everyone's situation is different. A person who, for example, has two affluent parents, who's living a very comfortable upper middle class suburban life, and has resources to be able to go to school, to be able to purchase, they have access, is not like the person who, for example, is wants to go to school, but they have to drive a cab to be able to support their elderly parents because they're all abjectly poor, and they're struggling. So the two situations are not the same whatsoever. But what we found in general is I kind of term it kind of bougie fatwas, Like we a lot of our answers are very focused on the affluent that already have access to their own money, and facilitating for them the ability to finance and invest and buy halal meat and whatever else. And the person who kind of struggles is the average person who goes, well, not only do like even if I wanted to, there's no financial inclusion for me. Even if I wanted to get a loan, no one's going to loan me, right? Like I know a guy who, his parents split when he was in middle school. They were all, they split before they even came to the U.S. His mom made it to the U.S. They grew up in very difficult situation, and he basically funded his college education through credit cards. Just like apply for a credit card, pay, balance transfer, pay one card off with another, you're just basically flipping this debt and the interest on the debt until he is able to finish school, went to work, paid it all down, is doing very well for himself. But when he and I spoke, he's like, I'm not saying that I wanted to do this, but I had to. Because it was either I go to school with whatever resources are available to me, or I'm going to continue to have my family stuck in poverty for the rest of our lives. And he's able to, now he's like multiple property owner and numerous investments, and his kids just graduated from college themselves. He paid for out of pocket, right? So my message is be very wary of anyone who's in this situation. Be very wary of simply getting general answers from the public, or even like, I'm going to search YouTube. I saw Joe say XYZ. No, like your situation is very specific. And so you should ask according to your specific situation. And that's the definition of a fatwa. A fatwa is a response of the approximate ruling of Allah and His Messenger to your specific situation, right? Without there being any kind of mandate to follow that ruling. Like that's different from qada. Qada is, a court ruling is you have to follow it. The fatwa is where you have the option of following it. But seek individual advice about your situation if you're in that situation, so that you can rest assured that in 4 or 5 years somebody else is not going to bring you a different YouTube clip, and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? And then you're like, now I don't know what to do. All right, now I feel bad. So we want to prevent people from going into situations where they're carrying a lot of emotional baggage that can really affect their faith. I've seen people have a crisis of faith because they say, years ago I followed a scholar who said don't do something. Now I'm finding out that their scholars say that it's allowed, and I've missed out on that opportunity, right? Or the opposite. Like they were saying it was allowed, and I went and did it, and then now I've gotten into all these problems, and now I feel bad because I've lost all this money, or XYZ has happened. In reality, at the end of the day, each individual person needs to be assured that they have to do their homework, understand the situation that they're in, present the understanding of that situation and their personal circumstances to a qualified scholar privately, and then gain an answer based on that. But if everything is just plucking generalities from the ether, we will always end up disappointing.
And thank you for that. And that's a very important point. I mean, I think you said this earlier in the podcast that fatwas are not supposed to be general, and there were very far and few in between that were general. They were mostly specific to situations. But you mentioned something important about spirituality and how spirituality is connected. I mean, as Muslims, we believe everything has to connect back to our deen, including our finances and our money, and we know the emphasis of that in the Quran, and the Hadith. The phrase as it goes, money corrupts, and some even argue that in the Islamic tradition, wealth is almost associated with or often people with wealth are associated with corruption and temptation to evil, right? We have examples of stories from the Quran, but even I mean, the Quraysh, like, what was one of their primary reasons to fight the Prophet ﷺ? It was monetary, it was economic. They wanted to save their wealth. And so, how do we understand money in the context of spirituality? How do we look at this object that is money and try to use it for our benefit to increase in spirituality and avoid the negative consequences where it could decrease our spirituality?
Yeah, so I think conceptualizing our relationship, understanding what our relationship with money is, first and foremost, is very important. So the glorification of wealth is a problem, and the aggrandizement of wealth for the sake of wealth, affluence for the sake of affluence, is definitely a problem. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "أنا للفقر أخشى عليكم ولكني أخشى أن تفتح عليكم الدنيا كما فتحت للذين من قبلكم فتضلون كما ضلوا." It's not poverty that I fear for you, but I fear that the gates of this world will be open for you, meaning in wealth, like they were open for those who came before you, and you will go astray like they went astray. I believe it's narrated from Al-Hasan al-Basri or others. I know that Ibn Muflih mentions it in Adab al-Shar'iyya, where he says, so Al-Hasan was one of the tabi'een, right? So kind of in the vein of this hadith, he says, إِنَّ لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ صَنَمًا وَصَنَمُ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ الْمَالِ. Every nation has its idol, and the idol of this nation is wealth. So we have at times an inclination to magnify and aggrandize wealth and affluence, and think of it to kind of be the be all end all, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids us from overextending our gaze at the blessings that He's given others. وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ إِلَى مَا مَتَّعْنَاهُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُمْ زَهْرَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا لِنَفْتِنَهُمْ فِيهِ. Do not overextend your gaze to that which we have given them to enjoy from the pleasures of this life, so that we can test them in it. So not every wealth is a blessing. Some wealth is a curse. But if all we're asking for is wealth, we might be asking for a blessing or a curse. But if we're asking for blessings, then Allah will give us that which is best for us. So if wealth comes to us, right, we should be striving for wealth. If wealth comes to us, then we can enjoy it. I believe it's the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anh, I want to say, in Bukhari and Ahmed, where he comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he comes to him to accept Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "I want to give you something, but I don't have anything with me right now. لكني سأبعثك على جيش فلعلك تغتنم ويرزقك الله منه رزقا صالحا." أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. So I'm gonna send you out in a battalion, or for a military excursion. And perhaps you'll find some spoils of a battle, and you'll gain some righteous sustenance from that. And Abdullah ibn Amr's response was, "Ya Rasulullah, lam uslim li ajl al-mal." Oh, Messenger of Allah, I didn't accept Islam for money, right? I accepted Islam for the sake of Allah and His Messenger. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, يا عبد الله بن عمر نعم المال الصالح للرجل الصالح. Oh, Abdullah ibn Amr, this is simply righteous wealth for a righteous man. Or how good is righteous wealth for a righteous man? It's probably a better translation. How good is righteous wealth for a righteous man? So it's important that we understand that our wealth should be a catalyst for our akhirah. It should not be our akhirah. A lot of our visions of wealth are informed by the hedonism and the exploitative consumption of people on social media and in the general media. and that's why, that's why you have guys out there talking about being an alpha, girls out there talking about being a boss babe, or they use another word, but I won't use that, right? And if you look at the people that they're projecting onto, right, or that they're extending their gaze to, right, these are all people who are living extremely plastic, fake, and contrived lives of inconspicuous consumption, of overindulgence in life's pleasures, and they're doing so on borrowed money and borrowed time. And then we wonder, well, why am I depressed? Why am I having these spiritual sicknesses that I have? Because the object of worship has become money, and the profits of that object of worship have become social media influencers. So you're following the wrong God and the wrong prophet. And so you have to, if wealth comes to you, alhamdulillah, it's a blessing from Allah, right? As the hadith of Hakim bin Hizam, the Prophet ﷺ told him, "Man atahu hadha al-mal min ghayri sharafi nafsin," right? Whoever wealth comes to without a sense of entitlement, right? Then Allah will bless him in that wealth. And whoever takes it with a sense of entitlement, then it will become a curse for him. After that day, Hakim never asked for money from the Prophet again, even though he was Khadija's maternal uncle. Hakim bin Hizam was Khadija radiallahu anha's maternal uncle, was very close to the Prophet ﷺ his entire life, before Islam and after. But at that point, after he became Muslim, after Fath Mecca, and he was kind of down on his luck for business, and he asked for money from the Prophet, and the Prophet told him this about having either a sense of entitlement or a sense of gratitude, he never asked again. In fact, his money that was owed to him built up in Bayt al-Mal until the time of Umar. And Umar said, announced it in front of everybody, hey, everybody, I call you as witnesses. I've tried to give Hakim this money. He doesn't want it. And Hakim said, after I heard this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, I will never take anything from anyone ever again. So my point being is that if you have to look at wealth as simply a tool in your toolbox to get you to a better akhirah, but it's not the only thing, nor should it ever be the objective.
May Allah Azza wa Jal grant us all righteous, as you said, righteous wealth.
Ameen.
And I know we're running close to the end of time here, so I do want to thank you, Sh Joe Bradford, for. This was a huge topic, so there was no way we could have covered all the specifics and questions. And that's not the point of this podcast. It's if someone, as you said, someone does have serious questions about how to manage their wealth, that's why they go to a financial advisor, and preferably a Muslim financial advisor if they want to make sure that they align their ethics as well as their money with the Islamic principles. And there's other things that we wanted to talk about. We didn't get the time. Sheikh Joe, we know you have a history in fiqh or a background in fiqh, as well in other Islamic sciences that we wanted to explore. You've translated books in that capacity as well. But I know we're running close to the end of time, so I won't hold you any longer. But inshallah, we would love to have you again. I want to thank you so much for sharing all the wisdom that you did. I think a lot of those answers, there's something, it's going to help people, right? And it not necessarily give people the exact answers they wanted to hear per se, but it's going to help people understand more what Islam, when we talk about this big, I'm going to stop using Islamic finance. I'm going to use something else. I'm just going to say finance. But what it means from an Islamic perspective, and what does it mean when we say, in Islam, this is what money means to us, and this is how we need to use it in order to enhance our relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal and benefit people and benefit humanity. So barakallahu feek, jazakallah khair, and hopefully we can get you again.
Inshallah, I'd be happy to. Jazakallah khair for the invite, Mohsen, and appreciate you guys and everyone there at Mishkat.
Barakallahu feekum, and assalamu alaikum to everybody else. Have a wonderful day.